Hello, everybody, and welcome to WP Roundtable. I think this is 76. I have no idea. Kyle's responsible for counting that high. I'm Jason Crawford, coming to you from Medellin, Colombia, and looking forward to this one.
I'm Marc Benzakein. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, coming to you live from the inside of my wife's office.
Thanks, Mark. Hey guys,
you're welcome.
Happy to be here for episode 77. We've got an awesome guest and a lot of stuff to cover, and some topics that I'm really excited to discuss with somebody that I've been a fan of for a long time, Miss Rachel Carden. She works at the University of Alabama, and she is the person behind this WP campus thing that we're going to learn a lot about. So, Rachel, thanks for joining us on the show.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
It's a privilege to have you here, and we've got a heck of a lot of questions and some cool stuff we want to talk about. Before we do, we're going to start with our quick picks of the week. It's part of the show every week where we share something interesting that we want everybody to know about. It could be anything that you find interesting. I'm going to share a link that I already put on the Google Plus event page for this Hangout. The URL is archive.wordpress.org/interviews. If you haven't heard about it, Siobhan, shamedly, I don't know the correct pronunciation of her last name, but she's working on the history of WordPress as a book, and she has been doing audio interviews with a lot of notable players in the WordPress community who have been around for a while and have been involved in important parts of this huge project. And so archive.wordpress.org/interviews has a whole host of absolutely fantastic recordings of important people in the community. Everybody from Matt Mullenweg to Andrew Nason to Corey Miller to Mark Jakewith and Alex King. Tons and tons of people who, lots of former guests of the show, people who have had an impact on the community and been around for a long time. Super interesting to just hear them talk about how things came to be where they are today, and so much that I didn't know. And super cool that all of these recordings are publicly available. I think that's just amazing. So check it out if you're interested. It's really, really good listening. Great interviews.
Well, before I jump in, I've got to ask, so is this 76 or 77? Because if it's actually 77, like you said, I'm on the wrong document.
I think this is 76.
Okay. So my pick of the week is iThoughts X, and I just got turned on to it a few days ago. We're really loving it. I think it's great. I think it's only for Mac, but if you're not using a Mac, you shouldn't be listening to this anyways.
The podcast?
Yeah, our show.
Huh.
That's my theory.
All right.
My pick of the week is the WP Developers Club. If you haven't heard about this, this is a really cool thing, and it's a really fast-growing community of developers run by a woman named Tanya. She was on Carrie Dill's podcast a few weeks ago, which is where I learned about it. And it's free to join, and they have both a premium and free learning courses, and they have a Slack channel, and it's really quite a vibrant community of developers. So whether you're a beginner or whether you're advanced, I recommend you go there and check them out, because I think she's got a really good thing going. So WPDevelopersClub.com, I believe, is the URL.
Thanks, Mark. That does sound pretty cool, and I've been hearing a lot of good things about it too. Rachel, do you have something to share?
I do. If you're even remotely interested in marketing, I highly recommend you check out the podcast and follow Scott Stratton on Twitter. I believe his handle is Unmarketing. He does a lot of, there's is the title of everything he does, but he actually has a few books and stuff like that. But he brings a really interesting perspective to marketing, and he's really funny. If you ever get the chance, I saw him, he was a keynote at a conference I was at last week, and he's really funny, and he's really genuine, and I highly recommend you check that out. It's pretty funny.
Awesome. I'm always looking for cool new podcasts, so Jason and Rachel, I'm going to be listening to both of those here pretty soon. I appreciate that. Okay, so that out of the way, we want to learn about Rachel Carden. We have a lot of questions for you, Rachel. So let's get started at the beginning, if we could. Do you mind telling us, going back a little bit, what kind of things you wanted to do as you were growing up? What did you want to be?
When I was growing up, I wanted to be a band director. I was a music nerd. I was really into. I grew up in a really musical family, and in like the fourth grade, I started in a band at school and played the clarinet. And so from like fourth grade until high school, I wanted to be a band director. I was a super band nerd.
Wow.
Random, right?
Yeah, yeah. So you saw band directors and you said, that's what I want to do. They're doing something that I could do.
I had a really awesome in elementary school. I went to a magnet school from elementary and junior high. So I had like really awesome band directors in elementary and in junior high. And then kind of what ruined it for me was high school. I had a kind of crappy band director. He let out all the steam. And so then in high school, I joined the yearbook staff and got into graphic design and started playing around with kind of very basic programming, and I made these little websites and stuff like that. And so, but the yearbook was what really started getting me into the design, and so I decided that I wanted to be a graphic designer. But I had this kind of side love of programming and problem solving and logic and all that stuff. And there wasn't really a program around here. There still isn't, sadly. But so I kind of did the best I could, and I decided that I would go to school and I'd major in graphic design, and I minored in computer science. So yeah. So and then just kind of taught myself the rest. I can't really say that I learned a whole lot in my minor in computer science, but the things that I took the most from it was I took this really great problem-solving class, and that went a long way. The rest of the classes weren't really much of nothing. I did take a really great accessibility, like Section 508 class, but other than that, I taught myself PHP, and I taught myself, all that stuff. The program that I was in, they were very focused on C++. So I learned a little bit of C++ that I've never used ever again, but your book is what turned my world around.
Wow, that's fascinating. Graphic design is that gateway for so many people into the web. I think you're certainly not alone in that. So how about your career? You finished up college. What sort of things did you start doing professionally?
My first job out of college was as a graphic designer.
Awesome.
I kid around that I went to college and I never left. My first job out of college was at a university in Columbus, Mississippi, Mississippi University for Women. It's a pretty small college. They educate men. But I was the graphic designer for the entire university.
Wow.
This is fairly small, but it was still a big task. But I was there for about a year and a half, and then all that while, like, doing web stuff on the side and kind of realizing that I really liked web design and web development more, and that's what I wanted to do with my career. And so my next job, I took a full-time web job at Samford University, which is a little bit bigger. It's in Birmingham, Alabama. Excuse me. And so I went from like 2,500 students to about 5,000 students, and then I took my current job at the University of Alabama, and I've been there almost 5 years, and we have over 37,000 students. So a little bit of a leap, but it was also my alma mater, and so I got the call home, and so for my entire career I've been in higher education, which is really neat. I had maybe like a 2-month stint at a non-higher education job that completely bombed, and I went back, but lesson learned. So that was actually just a bad situation anyway, not a definitely are a good example of working outside higher ed. But so I've been in higher ed for 99.9% of my career, and I love it. And it's a really great. I like to compare it a lot with WordPress in the notion that it's got very similar like community aspects, and it's just a bunch of divisions and a bunch of different departments and stuff all working together, in a hopefully open environment, all towards the same goal of just educating students and higher learning and research and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of aspects of like the WordPress open source community that's really similar to the higher education community, which is why I love them both.
That's amazing. What a fascinating parallel that you draw. So you worked at 3 different colleges in that time period, and as I understand, you've had multiple roles within the University of Alabama, your current employer. So how was your role and the type of work that you were doing changing from that first college job to the next, to the U of A, to where you are today?
When I first came to UA?
Just how has your role, the type of work that you've done, changed? You started as a graphic designer, and you've evolved to what today?
Oh, so I'm my official title is web developer, but I'm a one-man team and I do it all. So I'm a web designer and I'm a web developer, and I don't really do I don't really write content, but I help with content strategy and stuff like that. But I definitely try to add in designer and developer because I'm definitely doing both, and that's pretty much what I've been. I've never actually worked in an instance where I was just a developer or I was just a designer. I've had to do front end and back end, front end development, back end development. I've had to kind of do it all because at least definitely in both jobs at UA, I'm in my second position, and in both instances here at UA, I'm a one-man team that's kind of doing it all. Now in my current position, the only difference is that I don't do like what I would consider like the hardcore back-end stuff. We have someone who does like online applications. His job is to do all our online applications, so I don't touch that. But as far as any kind of front-facing websites, I take care of all that.
So you have several websites. Are you managing them, building them from scratch, and what kind would you be working with?
So I'm a big fan of multi-site, so it lets me have it all in one spot. I pretty much believe that multi-site was made for higher education. It's very big. It's used a lot. There are some schools, it's just like mind-blowing how many sites they have on a multi-site network. And I know of some installs with like tens of thousands of websites, and like 30,000 users and stuff like that. And I don't have that many sites, thank God. But I have about, in my last position, I got up to about 50 websites, and I manage them all. And so that, that fact alone is kind of insane. But in my current position, I've only been in it about 4 months, and I'm actually having to migrate everything from Cold Fusion. And so there are probably about 40 to 50 websites that I am responsible for now, as far as like managing, and so I'm having to one by one move them from this Cold Fusion HTML template system that's, people are having to use like contribute to manage and migrate over to WordPress. So at this point, we've got about 4 or 5 sites moved over, and so dealing with a lot in multi-site and then the notion of like distributed responsibilities in the system, because I can't manage like the content on every site, so there's a person in each department who's responsible for managing their content, keeping it up to date, so I have to train them, and I have to make sure things work, and I have to make sure they have a good interface and they understand, and so trying to take advantage of plugins that can help me with stuff like that, and taking advantage of resources. The older I get, the wiser I get in the notion that it's like I don't need to build everything. There are some things that I can just pay money for, and it's really good, and implement and use and stuff like that. So It's definitely an interesting, and even like outside WordPress tools, we just implemented like a web governance tool that's like blowing my mind, and so I definitely the older I get, the more I learn and the more I implement things that can help me save time, because you're one person and you're managing the upkeep of like 40 to 50 websites, and it's insane, and so you get pretty crafty.
So what's a typical day like for you these days?
These days I'm in redesign mode, and so we're having to like redesign all the templates from these Cold Fusion websites. These templates are like 4 years old. They're not only in Cold Fusion and really hard to manage, but they're 4 years old. They're not responsive, and so it's not just a matter of migrating. It's a matter of giving them a whole new look and bring them up to speed a little bit. So right now it's really big redesign and really big research mode, and trying to implement like really good structure and organization and have a good plan so that going forward things just kind of move like clockwork, and so, and also like really big in my world is accessibility, and so making sure that going forward these templates are accessible, and then a lot of it has to do with like education and trying to educate people on campus why our websites, all the content in our website should not be inside PDFs, and so it's my days now are like a lot of research and note taking and drawing out little excuse me, lots of drawing on paper and lots of benchmarking, and I've got a wall in my office I'm covering with things I'm printing out that I like, and that the design that I like, and little pieces that I like, and setting up all these little Slack integrations. I'm a big Slack user, and so today I was trying to show my colleagues how we can set up all these integrations from Twitter, and I'm writing a plugin right now that will basically send all our not send a bunch of WordPress notifications into Slack, and so that way we can really watch. A lot of the key with my organization is like being able to like know what's going on in our WordPress environment, because it's just knowing when somebody updated something, and knowing, I learned about Stephanie Leary's content audit plugin a week or two ago, and I'm really excited to get that one going. Y'all know what that plugin is?
No.
Basically, it lets you set it lets you set almost kind of like notifications when content hasn't been touched in so many months, or so like the notion that I'll get a notification when a page hasn't been touched in like 6 months is huge. Especially when you're one person and you're basically putting all these sites into the hands of people that aren't web professionals, and it's not really their main job to update sites. It's one of those duties as needed kind of things in job descriptions that we kind of joke about in higher ed. But and so that kind of plugin I think will be really helpful. Go in and say, hey, let this person know, hey, you need to go read this page over, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's all fresh, there's nothing wrong in it, because that's what really is a problem, is that like I just said, you're putting sites in the hands of people who are not web professionals, they're not web content professionals, and so of course it's not a really big thing to think that they're going to make a page and then go on with their day-to-day actual job and forget about it. And so tools like that are really come in handy for me, so I'm really excited to use that.
Well, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's called Content Audit. I think it's free. It's in the repo.
Well, I got one more question for you. So throughout the time with all the various tools and all the multi-sites you're working with, is there anything that's been particularly mind-blowing good or particularly horrible that you wanted to share?
About like my history in higher ed, or?
No, with the websites that all you're dealing with, all these microsites and everything?
No, nothing that jumps out at me. My big, nothing that, there was one site that I managed on my last one of my networks that was kind of, they liked to, I kind of gave them a little more power than other people. Generally, like, you couldn't like put in anything, you couldn't put any plugins, and but they really wanted this slider thing, and I didn't have the time to fuss with it, and I just okay, and it didn't end up being some like horrible nightmare, but the plugin like broke half the site, and like it was definitely a lesson learned. I think that we got it working, and I basically had to hack the plugin because it was, and all this stuff, and I think I actually have a plugin out there that lets you just kind of lock down plugins from being updated for instances like this, and so I had to lock it down, and I'm like, you know, it's when you're in a position where you only have so much time to spend on stuff, you know, sometimes you just have to lock down a plugin and say don't touch it, and we have to move on to the next thing, and so that was definitely one of my more nightmare experiences, but mostly it's like in my experience, this is not. And I'm not the normal probably with a lot of these multi-sites. It would be interesting to talk to some of these people that manage these multi-sites with like tens of thousands of sites. They probably have something interesting to say. But on my two instances, I mean, I control everything pretty strictly, and I'm the only one in there doing anything, and so there's not really a bunch of like horror stories because it's just me. But that might change, so we'll see. I'll check back in with you on that.
Fascinating. So the next thing I want to know about WP Campus. Tell us about the origin of this new idea. What is it, and how did this idea come to be?
Okay. Well, what it is it's a community mostly, and a proposed conference for people that use WordPress in higher education. And it started on Twitter, actually. They were on Twitter. Everyone was on Twitter talking about WordCamp US. And Chris Lima tweeted out something that basically said, it looks like WordCampus. When you write out WordCamp US, it looks like WordCampus. And so light bulb came on, and I was like, man, you know, wouldn't that be awesome if we had a WordCamp for higher education? And, you know, it was just kind of like, y'all dream with me. Let's all get together. And so people started, you know, the kind of response to that started growing, and I just had to run with it. And so I went out and bought a couple of domains. Actually, so that was later. Actually, Chris Lima went out and bought the domain, which was really awesome of him. And he just did it because he wanted to and let us use it. And so I started putting together like a base template, and I talked with Brian Krausgard over a post status and said, hey, if I write a post for you, you know, would you publish it and help me, you know, get this thing off the ground? And he said, yeah, that'd be awesome. And I made a Slack account, and that was it. We just went from there. And, you know, I was talking with a group last week about just starting communities, and it's like sometimes it's, you know, all you need to do is start a Slack account and throw up a one-page website, and then, you know, that's all it takes. And, you know, and the feedback has been so great. I was at WordCamp Tampa a couple weeks ago talking to folks about it, and I was at a High-Ed Web conference last week and just talked to so many people who were like so pumped about it and so excited. We had buttons, and it was pretty cool. And so we've had over 300 people fill out the interest form on our website, and it's only been about 8 weeks. And so over 200 of them are in our Slack account, and we've had a few planning meetings, and we had one today where we talked about, you know, some different ways that our community can bring value to our community and outside our community, and there were some amazing ideas. And so we're talking about, we're already, you know, kind of in the very early stages of planning like a conference. And so we're kind of aiming toward early summer. And nothing's tied down yet, but we're kind of aiming towards early summer next year, probably late May or July, end of June, early July. And so, you know, we're talking about possible venues, and so And then we're talking about, what we can do between now and then, to keep the ball rolling. We want, we have so many great people in this group, what can we do between now and then to, like, share the love and to, bring some information to the group and stuff like that. So it's pretty awesome.
It is awesome. It's very impressive. So tell me a little bit, why now? Why is now the right time for a higher ed specific WordPress conference? What made you think, like, this can happen? All the signs, just, I think we can make it a reality.
I honestly, like, didn't think that, like, I guess, deep about it. I just kind of thought this would be awesome and we should do it. But it's kind of amazing. I keep telling folks that it's been, like, in the last 8 weeks, how many things have come together after this happened to, like, talk about it. I didn't think about it then, but the fact that I'm part of the High Ed Web Association, which is this organization for high ed web professionals. And, like, that was last week, and I didn't think about how that was coming up, and all these things came together. I mean, it's a long story about the buttons, but just the fact that we had buttons that were ready for this conference and all this stuff that came together. But the idea itself isn't new, and I know that several folks have kind of had the same idea over the last few years, and I'm not really sure to what extent they tried or why it didn't work out then. So I feel like this has been kind of brewing for a while. This is something that people have wanted for a while. The opportunity just hasn't arisen, and so I don't know why now. I don't know if it's just there's clearly a need. So many people are so excited. And if you ever, like, you get in the Slack channel and they're so, like, everyone's so pumped and there's so many ideas, and it's, so whatever the reason that it seems this is kind of working out, I'll take it because it's amazing. But I definitely, like, I feel like it's probably been brewing for a while, and so it just needed a new match under the fire kind of thing.
It's pretty interesting. I've had this conversation with people recently too, even before WP Campus became like before you booted it up. I was having conversations with a few other notable people in the community, just reflecting on how, like, higher ed seems to be this new tidal wave coming into WordPress and embracing it. There's just, from outside higher ed, we're observing this. I'm in the agency world, and we're seeing a lot more local colleges and universities looking, calling us up and saying, we don't need a website, we need a WordPress website. Can you help us with that? And it's become really interesting. I even talked with Jason Cohen at WP Engine about the same thing. He said exactly that. A lot of colleges and universities is like this growing customer segment. Everybody's flocking to WordPress. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have thoughts on why I feel like universities should support WordPress. I have thoughts on why universities have avoided WordPress. Why all of a sudden they're flocking to it, I don't know if it's just because the word's gotten out. And because before, pretty much, I feel like the #1 stigma and why universities don't want to use WordPress, it's definitely security, and it's what you hear the most. And when someone says their OIT department told them they couldn't use WordPress, you ask, well, why? Security, and that's always the reason that I hear. And some universities now are, before they might not have thought it. They might have just said, okay, we'll use something else. But now people are wanting to use it so much that they're bringing people in to give security presentations, and they're trying to put together documentation, and they're trying to pull together resources to argue the case. And because, like, we probably all understand that there's a security problem with any system that you set up just about, but there's a lot of these OIT concerns are unfounded, and they're mostly out of just they don't know, and they don't whenever we've had a few problems with sites being hacked, and it's always because the site was set up 4 years ago and ignored, and so that's it. That's always the problem. And so there's definitely a security stigma that can, there's definitely, doc resources or information that can be prepared that would be really helpful for people in universities to share. I know some already exist. I know there's some information even on the WordPress website. But someone today in Slack, when we were talking about, what value could we bring, someone even basically said that. They said, information that I can take back to people at my university to show them that we should be using WordPress and there's not a security problem and blah blah blah. So it's definitely something that universities like OIT departments are concerned about. It's funny. One of the WP Campus articles that came out, I think it was the one on WP Tavern. Someone commented on the blog post and said, WordPress will never be used in higher ed. This was like 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, whenever that was. And we're all kind of like, durr. And Curtis, this guy in WP Campus, he's amazing, chimes in and he's like, and basically, talks about how it's being used all over the place and there are plugins that came out of higher ed and it's definitely being used. And so it seems like there is kind of like outside higher ed, people I guess don't understand how much it's being used if you don't, and I can kind of understand that if you're just never really been, and we have our own little world, and hopefully, it does seem like we're getting to a point where we're kind of people outside our world are, at least now, hopefully with WP Campus, everyone outside will get a better glimpse into how we're using WordPress and what we're doing and all the cool use cases. I think there's a lot of cool use cases for WordPress in higher ed. And if you find my slides on SlideShare, I actually have 4 or 5 slides with bullet points and that I talked about at WordCamp Tampa. I think that the new API, it's being merged into Core. I've been using it as a plugin for a little while. And I think that higher education is a great use for it. We have, this very distributed model of websites where not every university is this way, but especially at large universities like Alabama, we're very decentralized and everyone kind of has their own websites. They're definitely, siloed out into their own, hosting and all the stuff. But we have content that we want to share with each other. A big, example that's commonly probably used is news and events. So the notion that the person running RUA news sites on WordPress, so they could easily, set up the API and then share news with every other website on campus. So that way departments and divisions, can show their news on their website, but still lead people, back to the main news site and stuff like that. So there's, that would be a great place to kind of highlight the API in different ways that we could use it. Stuff that's like course catalogs, where you have a website that holds all your course descriptions, but that website owns the content, but departments and stuff still want to show their courses on their website. And so the notion that you could use an API and pull all that in, so that way users can still see your courses on your website, but that department doesn't own the information. Rarely do departments own that kind of information. It's usually owned by the registrar. But so stuff like that. There's lots of examples in higher education where WordPress is being used in really cool ways. So multi-site being one of them. But there's definitely other areas that we could really stretch it out and use it in neat instances.
So are there any specific vision or goals for WP Campus?
Obviously, one of our big things that we'll work towards is the conference, but I see it as more of a community. And yes, we will have this big conference event, and we kid around, big is a relative term. But I really want WP Campus to be a place where people using WordPress and mostly higher ed. We do have some K through 12 people in the group, which is interesting. We've had a fair amount of K through 12 interest. So they are more than welcome if y'all want to come and join our group. But a place to come, and at the very base, we're really using Slack. And that was today when we had the discussion, that was the first thing. Well, the Slack is great, and that's value, and it totally is. But we see the potential for tutorials and walkthroughs and white papers and case studies, and there's like this plethora of information and experience and smarts and in our group, and so we had this opportunity to kind of share our brains with mostly each other, but but also outside our group. Anyone who is interested is more than welcome and to come and chit chat with us and to share with us. And so we're getting the ball rolling on implementing and setting up these different ways that we can help each other. And I'm a big proponent of like professional development, and I'm a big believer in like the notion of like taking care of humans. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of things that we can do to help each other grow as people and help each other grow as WordPress developers, to help each other grow as higher education professionals. We are WordPress developers, we are also higher education professionals, and it's like which is a whole other like field of knowledge and things to work around and to learn and grow in. And so definitely lots of potential in our group to share a lot of information and to help each other improve and to grow what we're doing and be better at what we do.
You actually kind of touched on my next question there. You mentioned that there's a lot of higher ed professionals in there. Are you involving like the student body at all, or the students?
We haven't really had any. It's not because we've said no. We talk about how we can pull students in. We just haven't had the interest yet. But I definitely think that there's potential for that. People have talked about the notion that students who are interested in web development, are learning or be interested in learning WordPress, and they're welcome. I feel like maybe we have one who's filled out the form, so that might be an area where we, in the future, I guess maybe invest in getting a student's attention, and maybe we'll get to the point where we can offer resources for students who are wanting to learn WordPress. Because there's also the aspect of like WordPress and education where people there's lots of folks in our group who are using WordPress to teach things. So it's like a good majority of us are using it to make marketing, content, websites, and stuff like that. But there's definitely a contingent in our group who use WordPress as basically like a learning management system. And that's not something that I haven't done before, so I'm not super knowledgeable on how it's being used, but it's definitely being used because they talk about it a lot. So that could be some really cool sessions or some really cool content that we can put up on the side. Have someone walk through how they're using it or talk about how they're using it and how it's helping. I'm working with a student right now who we're redesigning a website on campus, and it's not in WordPress, but it's in just an HTML site. But he's so excited, and he's like having the time of his life. Can you remember the time when you got excited about copying and pasting Google Analytics code in your header? You got excited about that today. So there's definitely like there's a student group that would love this kind of information and to use it to help them grow as and to kind of get into web development and design and stuff like that.
That's amazing and really cool. So I've got another question for you. I'm curious to just get your thoughts why basically we're talking just about higher ed specifically here. We're not talking about jazz musicians or ice cream truck drivers or pinball machine repair people. It's just higher ed and their use cases for WordPress. And just maybe you could elaborate a little bit, because you know better than anybody, what's unique about the use cases that colleges and universities have for WordPress? What sets them apart from other industries and businesses?
Excuse me. I guess what I was referring to are like really unique examples of ways WordPress is being used that you don't I'm sure someone else is probably doing, but you don't really hear about a lot. So like, kind of part of the reason that I feel like WP Campus is blossoming is just the notion that like a lot of us, use WordPress and we love it and we go to WordCamps, but a lot of things that we have to deal with aren't really touched on at WordCamps. Sometimes, maybe a session or two, not that they're not helpful, but overall it's like usually like blogging or like e-commerce. We don't use e-commerce. We don't. That doesn't say some universities don't, but we have to go through financial affairs, and they have their own system. We don't. I have never set up an e-commerce instance in higher education. So, but there are. I'm trying to pull up my slides so that I can make sure that I am kind of refreshed on some of the stuff I talked about. But like some really something kind of unique that I've set up, or I'm still working on, is an access control request system. So the notion of like, having an online system where you request access to a system that has to go through like a workflow of getting approved. And this, the notion of like an online form with workflows, I guess, is not probably unique to higher ed, but you have these very specific use cases. And like I touched on earlier, like the notion of like of course catalogs and like setting up all these ways. And last week at High Ed Web, I got to see a really great session from his name's Jeff Stevens. If you ever get the chance to talk to Jeff, he's really funny, and he's from University of Florida Health, and he gave this whole session about how they set up this intranet system using WordPress and BuddyPress and he's always really great presenter, and he shared it in this context of like Batman and Superman, and it was really great. But hopefully he will come and present at WP Campus about his system, because it's pretty cool. But because, like we kind of touched on earlier, because a lot of these topics aren't really focused on it, like WordCamps and stuff, there's a lot of, I feel like that's probably why a lot of stuff that goes on in higher ed isn't really like discussed a lot, because it's not really like shared at WordCamps, because it's very unique, and it's very unique to higher ed, and so a lot of people maybe, I guess, probably don't present them at WordCamps because they don't really feel like anybody else would be interested. So this notion of having a place where we can all kind of come together and talk about our really maybe super specific to higher ed, but also at the core of it really cool instances. I talked to, I'm pretty sure I put it in my slides, of like there's lots of stuff that's being done in higher ed that I've never really heard about anyone using WordPress to do, that I think would be really easy to do. Stuff like really big in higher education is digital signage, which is basically, it's like, they put TVs in, our campus has like hundreds of buildings, and so they put TVs in them, and it's a way to show like announcements, and they have like now it's it's touch screens, and so they put people directories in them for you to find people and navigate around the building. But then also, what's really great about these things is that their real main purpose is like crisis communication. If there's a weather incident happening, they would have this way to show these messages. It's another way to get to the students. We probably have like 30 ways we send out crisis communication when it's happening, and it never hurts to have another way to get in front of a student or in front of faculty and staff and tell them something's happening. Here's what you need to do. And so, I know that what we use is not WordPress. But you could easily set up a system to manage your digital signage in WordPress. So if somebody wants to make a plugin that does that, that would be totally awesome. So there's lots of these like little needs. I think that some plugin developer could get in and and really provide a solution for some needs that are out there that could be handled with WordPress. And especially now with like the API and all this stuff, like you combine, like powers combine. And you could really make some cool tools that could be used on campuses.
Cool. I have a quick question. I'm going to try to get it in before the baby starts fussing. I do apologize for having him in here, but quick story here. So it's probably going to be a long question. Um, I have to tell a personal story. Last year, my dad, who's a retired professor, found himself in a situation. I'm sure you run into this at your university too, where you've got those professors that are like somewhat techie, and they like all the toys, but they know just enough to be dangerous. That's my dad. So last year he happened to be somewhere and opened up his mouth, and next thing he knew, he was to be developing a WordPress website for the university where he was taking some, basically keep your mind active classes that he was taking because he was retired. And next thing I know, he's calling me up, so I spend several hours going with him on how to create local development sites and working through WordPress and all of that kind of thing. And it sounds to me, if I understand correctly with WP Campus, what you're trying to do is definitely far more developer-centric, but do you have anything in mind for like faculty, for people like my dad who are just techie enough that they can like build a WordPress site out of the box, with a theme out of the box and plugins out of the box and kind of get it going? Or is it really more for a little bit more advanced people that are like full-time developer type people? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, totally. We have a lot of folks like that at our university. Lots of servers under desks.
Yeah.
And at most universities. I feel like he's more than so people like that are more than welcome to join, and we're very inclusive. That to say, there's lots of probably more discussions going on between web professionals, and that kind of person may not be able to follow along, but that's not to say that they couldn't come in and ask a question and someone in our group wouldn't be happy to help them. Also, to add on to that, as we kind of work on these resources that we want to provide eventually on the site, it might be a good resource for that kind of person. It's not going to be available next week or anything, but when it is available, that could be a resource for someone who's wanting to learn. I don't know. There's obviously already a lot of great WordPress learning resources out there, so we won't rewrite the book as far as here's how to get started with WordPress, but we might have some great resources on here's how to take advantage of WordPress to help with higher ed. So if he's trying to learn like how to create a site for his course or something like that, that I could definitely see that being a resource that we could work on and provide. Because there's also there's definitely several folks in the group who are really keen on those kind of topics. So they'd be probably more than welcome to write something up or put together a tutorial or a video walkthrough or something like that. So definitely.
Cool. Yeah. In his situation, I mean, you know how it is with higher ed. My experience with them is that you can find something out in the real world that 90% works, but then there's that 10% that really only applies to higher ed. And I think someone like my dad, and I think there are a lot of people like that out there, they're looking for people who kind of speak their language when it comes to that, rather than some guy who's just been developing websites in his basement for the last 20 years or whatever.
They would definitely find kindred spirits in our group.
So, how about we get into WordCamps a little bit, because this all started from you wanting a campus-level WordCamp. What was your first experience at a WordCamp?
WordCamp Birmingham was my first my only, I mean, I've gone several times, but my only WordCamp until this year, actually. So I live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and so Birmingham, Alabama is about an hour east of here. And so my first WordCamp was, I'm pretty sure whichever, if they had one in 2011, because that was the year I first started using WordPress. So I remember going to that and really enjoying it. It's definitely the closest WordCamp. Next year I'd like to go to WordCamp Atlanta, which isn't too far from here, about 3 hours, and There's one in Nashville, which isn't about the same driving distance. So I kind of made a goal this year that I would start to go to more and more. And so I was really excited to go to WordCamp Tampa just like 2 weeks ago. And so that was my first kind of adventuring outside of Birmingham. But my first was Birmingham, and then my second year there I spoke, and then then I spoke and I helped plan the last WordCamp Birmingham. They didn't have one this year. So yeah, that sounds right. 11, I don't know. So yeah, WordCamp Birmingham and then WordCamp Tampa. So hopefully next year I'll branch out a little bit more and head to a few other. I'd like to go to Miami, which is in February. So we'll see.
That's pretty exciting. So what other ways do you participate in the WordPress community? Are you involved in any of the WordPress community projects, or are you involved in any local WordPress meetups, or anything else besides WordCamps?
I was involved in like the Birmingham meetup when it was going on, and it's kind of going through it kind of dropped off the radar for a little while, and now they're trying to bring it back up. The problem is it's an hour away, and so driving there on a weeknight kind of sucks. And so I was involved as I could be. That's a really great group. Someone tried to start one here in my town, and we had one meeting, and that was it. And I think that I don't really know why it didn't work, but I don't think there's enough WordPress specific interest here to hold up an entire meetup. So fast forward like 6 months, and some other web nerds around here and I decided that we would start our own meetup, and we'd broaden the scope a little bit. So it's not a WordPress meetup. We have a group called Tuscaloosa Web Professionals, and we meet once a month, and it's essentially a WordPress meetup, but it's not WordPress. It's it's just whatever web. And so we've talked about all kinds of stuff. The first meetup, I think we talked about Docker, and then last month, the last meetup we had, someone came and talked. It was a WordPress person from Birmingham, Kate Newble. She came and talked. She drove over, which was really nice of her, and came and talked about security. And she was kind of WordPress specific, so which isn't the norm, but I wasn't complaining. And so it's a great group, and we meet in a bar and have some food and drink, and put up a slide projector and go to town. And so I'm, as far as like kind of like online communities, I'm not really involved. Not just no particular reason why, just haven't yet. So hope maybe one day. I haven't really contributed to, I guess, core like I would like to. I think I got my name mentioned one time because I did actually found some kind of weird. It was something to do with like the updater class. I found where it should have said plugins and it said themes or something like that, and he submitted that. So I got my name on the list one time. I don't even remember what release it was, but. So my only problem is that I have too much on my plate, and so it's a matter of finding the time. I work in higher education, which most higher ed people can understand that you're usually a one-man team doing the job of like 3 people, and so so time to. And then I do freelance work, and so it's like it's finding, and it's I don't like using that excuse, but it is what it is, and I'm working on becoming better at managing my time and saying no to certain things so that I can get involved with things that I feel matter, and so there's definitely kind of looking at other opportunities to get involved and stuff like that. I've definitely become a little bit of an event planner. And so I enjoy that, and I planned a high ed web conference this year at Alabama and stuff like that, and obviously WP Campus, will probably start to take up a lot more of my time, and so it's making that decision of saying no to other things, so you can devote time to things that you think are important, and so it's definitely an ongoing a work in progress for me of of being able to get more involved in stuff like that, which means, saying no to other stuff.
Wow. Yeah, you certainly do have a lot on your plate, a lot of things going on, but you're doing really cool work. So you mentioned kind of in passing some of the events that you'd like to check out, but we always want to just understand what's on your calendar and the things that people might bump into you in person at any kind of event, local or otherwise.
Well, so I organize a web professionals group on my campus, which I actually presented about at High Web Conference last week. We call ourselves Web Tide. If you're unaware, we're Alabama. We are the Crimson Tide, and so our group is called Web Tide, and we're all the web professionals on campus, and it's a really great group. I'd be kind of surprised if any of them were watching this, so you won't really run into me there. But we're really excited, and we actually meet this Thursday, and some folks are going to come and talk to us about crisis communication, and so we have lots of really great professional development discussion, and I love that. And then we have the Tuscaloosa Web Professionals group. I'm really involved in the Hyde Web Association. At least I try to be more and more involved. So we hosted a regional this year, and that was a lot of fun. The last week there was the Hyde Web conference, and so I was in Milwaukee for that, which was a lot of fun. And and then next year it's going to be in Memphis. If you're a higher education web professional, whether you use WordPress or anything, I would really recommend you looking into Hyatt Web. It's just hyattweb.org. And I'm going to be part of the conference staff to help plan out Memphis next year, so I'm really excited about that. And this is the first time it's going to be in the South, and so the closest it's come before, I think, was probably Austin, Texas, if you consider that the South. So I'm really excited about that. Like I said, I would love to get more involved and try to attend a few more WordCamps. I found out that I have a better travel budget than I realized, and so I'm aiming to go to Miami, and I'd love to go to WordCamp Atlanta and maybe Nashville and travel a little bit more and kind of get out. I was at LoopConf this year, which was a lot of fun, and I would love to go back. So I don't know where it's going to be next year. They haven't announced that yet, but so you can definitely and you can find me on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. But as far as I guess events on my calendar, I think that about kind of covers what I have planned. Going to Disney World in the summer if you want to find me there.
Well, that's exciting. Almost exciting as a WordCamp, I suppose.
Well, I'm going like a week after WordCamp US, so people were like, "Are you going to WordCamp US?" No, I'm going to Disney World. And so Disney World trumps WordCamp US. Sorry. Especially when I haven't been in like 2 years, and my boyfriend's never been, and so it'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Hey, Rachel, for future shows, do you have any suggestions for other guests that we could get here on the round table?
I mentioned him earlier, but Jeff Stevens would be interesting to have on. He's a character. I wouldn't mind reaching out to him for you if you wanted to get him on there.
That would be great.
Do what?
That would be great.
Yeah, Jeff would be really cool. Off the top of my head, I'll think about it. I'll let you know if I think of anybody else. But
Thank you.
Jeff's a lot of fun. He organizes a big karaoke outing every year at Hyde Web, and so and like I said, he gave this really great presentation. But it's not just like the fact that he talked about using WordPress in this really cool way, but he puts it in this context of basically like Batman versus Superman, and all the slides were really funny. But I mean, he phrased it in this really great way, of the notion of like, well, I mean, I like superheroes. I'm not like super knowledgeable about Batman and Superman, but basically how like one of them was help one way is like helping people, and then the other way of like helping people help themselves, and he tied it all together in like the superhero kind context, and it was really great. He did a really great job.
Wow.
Yeah, so it would be very interesting to chit chat with for a little while.
All right. That sounds exciting. So we're pretty much at the end here, and this hour's flown by super quickly.
Bummer.
But, great discussion. Didn't ask all the questions we wanted to, but we covered a lot of good stuff. So I think this is a productive hour for in my book.
I had a great answer to your time machine question too.
Oh, the time machine question. If it's a great answer, you could still answer it.
Oh well, I was
Time machine. What would you do with it?
I would just totally go back and just witness a bunch of like big events in history. And I was gonna talk about how have anyone watched Fringe? That show that came on Fox a couple years ago?
Mm.
Oh, bummer. It was this really great show, but they had this.
I was a big fan.
Who was a big fan? I was a huge.
Wife and I were big fans of the show, yeah.
And so there's a character. Basically, there's this concept that's very sci-fi, and they actually have time travel and stuff like that on the show. But they had these characters that that all they did was just like travel through time and like watch history, and they called them the observers, and it was just their job to kind of go through time and just watch stuff happen and take notes. And that's what I would do with the time machine. I would go through and I would be an observer, and I would just like watch things happen and just like go back to like really important events in time and just sit there and just like watch them.
So kind of like a silent Bill and Ted's.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Sometimes I watched Bill and Ted, so I'm just gonna sure.
It was exactly like that. Exactly like that.
Okay.
That was
So there you go.
Wow.
all right. Our time's up, and it's been a great time. Rachel, is there anything else that you want to share with anybody that maybe we didn't get to talk about, or we didn't ask, or that you just want to share with the world before we go?
Oh, nothing. Find me on Twitter, Bam the Designer. Other than that, WP Campus is, really big, and we talked about that. So not tomorrow. Well, no, never mind. Sorry, but no, I can't think of anything else that's really kind of big on my plate right now. And thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Rachel.
Even though Kyle, you're in Michigan and not Mississippi.
We're closer than Jason.
Everyone's closer than Jason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been a great one. Thank you again for coming. And keep in touch.
Will do. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rachel.